Hi Shopaholics! I'm Kez, and welcome to the second episode of Confessions of a Shopaholic. So in the previous episode, Rihanna introduced us to retail therapy, wallet sabotage, and the emotional spending cycle. She also explained how shopping can become a way to cope with stress, sadness, boredom, or emotional pressure. She also reminded us that purchasing itself is not the enemy. The concern begins when our spending becomes impulsive, reactive, and disconnected from our actual needs. So in this episode, we will look into one of the most familiar moments in that cycle. The moment when we look at something in our shopping cart and say, "Deserve ko to." For this episode, we are not to shame anyone for shopping, because just like what Rihanna said in the first episode, we are allowed to spend our money because we worked hard for it. But this episode is an invitation to all of us to reflect, because sometimes the question is not only, can I afford this? Sometimes the deeper question is, why do I feel like I need to buy this right now? That question matters because impulse buying is not only about money. It also connects to emotions, self-control, habits, environment, and decision making. So ano nga ba talaga ang impulse buying? It refers to a sudden, unplanned decision to buy something immediately. Do you ever find yourself window shopping in a mall, suddenly trying on clothes that you find cute until you're at the cashier paying, and just like that, you've bought another piece of clothing that you're not yet sure where to wear? So if yes, then that's actually impulse buying. It usually happens when we experience a strong urge to purchase, even when we did not originally plan to buy that item. Dennis Rook described impulse buying as a sudden, often powerful, and persistent urge to buy something immediately. He explained that this urge can create emotional conflict because the person may feel excitement and hesitation at the same time. In simple terms, part of us want the item now, while another part of us knows that we should probably think about it first. That is why impulse buying feels different from planned buying. Because planned buying sounds like, I need this for school, I budgeted for this, I compared these prices, or I thought about this purchase for days. But impulse buying sounds more like, ang cute, sale naman, last stock na, deserve ko to, or check out ko na bago pa ako maubusan. So a Reddit user shared that 95% of the stuff he or she bought or want and not needed, and that he or she doesn't want anymore to spend money on random stuff, but it is always tempting. So this tells us that consumers are more likely to make impulse purchases when they experience a favorable emotive reaction, such as pleasure or delight, and that consumers' low cognitive control, emotions, and spontaneous behavior influence their online shopping behavior, which are the triggers of impulse purchases among online shoppers. So with this, we can see that impulse buying is fast, it is emotional, and most of the time, it happens before we fully process the decision. So for me, the deserve ko to moment usually appears when I feel emotionally and physically drained. For example, after a long tiring day, I tend to open Shopee or Lazada just to scroll. At first, I tell myself, titingin lang ako, but then I see something cute or something I can use for future purposes. Maybe it has good reviews, maybe it is on sale, or maybe it is free shipping. Then suddenly, my mind starts building a case for why I should buy it. Pagod ako today, I survived this week, hindi naman ako palaging bumibili, mura lang naman, or sayang yung free shipping. And the more I repeat those lines, the more the purchase feels justified. But sometimes, after checking out, the excitement fades. And when the parcel arrived, I realized the item was not really something I needed. It was something I wanted in a very specific emotional moment. So this is why impulse buying is not just about being careless with money. It is often connected to how we manage our emotions. And another Reddit user described impulse spending as adding things to the cart just to feel something, and even reflected that it is not only about discipline, but also psychology, boredom, habit, and identity. So, this testimony is not scientific evidence by itself, but it shows how people experience impulse buying in real life. It shows that sometimes the cart becomes emotional space. We do not just add products, we add comfort, excitement, control, and distraction. Moreover, impulse buying tends to have two parts, which are the affective side and cognitive side. The affective side refers to feelings like pleasure, excitement, compulsion, lack of control, and even regret. The cognitive side refers to the lack of planning and deliberation. In other words, impulse buying involves feeling strongly and thinking less carefully. That is why the common phrase we say to ourselves, deserve ko to, is so powerful. It does not always come from careful reasoning. Many times, it comes from our emotions. When we say deserve ko to, we may not be asking, will I still want this tomorrow? Or am I buying this because I need it or because I want to feel better? Instead, we usually say, I feel bad and I want to feel better. That is not something to be ashamed of. We naturally look for comfort when we are tired or stressed. But the problem starts when buying becomes our automatic response to every circumstance. So, why does deserve ko to feel so convincing? First, it gives us emotional permission. When we say it, we are not just describing the item. We are giving ourselves approval to buy it. It becomes a form of self-comfort. Maybe we had a difficult week, maybe we finished the requirements, maybe we felt unappreciated, maybe we were sad, anxious, or pressured. Then, buying something becomes a way of saying, at least I can give something to myself. That is why impulse buying can feel emotionally meaningful even when the item itself is not truly necessary. So, research on retail therapy supports this idea. The researchers explain that retail therapy is often understood as buying self-treats to cheer oneself up. They explain that negative moods are connected with greater impulsivity and lower behavioral control, and that bad mood can lead to greater purchase and consumption of unplanned self-treats. So, when we are in a bad mood, we may be more likely to buy something unplanned because the purchase feels like a quick emotional repair. It turns the purchase into a reward. It makes the buying feel less random and more justified. So now, let us connect these to mood repair. Sometimes, we buy things because we want the emotional state that we think the object will give us. For example, a new clothes may feel like confidence, a new skincare product may feel like self-care, or a cute item may feel like comfort. So the item becomes a symbol of the feeling we want. Sadness is connected to a reduced sense of control, and that making purchase decisions can help restore a sense of personal control and reduce lingering sadness. So this helps explain why shopping can feel good at the moment. When life feels stressful or uncertain, buying something gives us decision we can control, and that sense of control can feel comforting. But again, the relief is often temporary. The purchase may help us feel better for a while, but it may not solve the actual reason we felt bad in the first place. Now, let us answer the main question in this episode. Why do we buy things we don't need? First, we confuse wanting relief with needing the item. For example, when we are stressed and we see something cute online, it can feel like we need the item. But sometimes, what we actually need is rest, reassurance, food, sleep, support, or even a break. Second, we imagine a better version of ourselves after the purchase. For example, we may think, if I buy this new tumbler design, I will drink more water. Sometimes that may be true, but sometimes we are buying the fantasy of change rather than practicing the behavior that creates change. And then third, Online shopping makes the decision too easy. The distance between wanting and buying is now very short. Before, we had to physically go to the malls, walk around, compare prices, and pay at the cashier. But now, we can literally buy something while lying in our bed. So, the fewer the barriers, the easier the impulse becomes. Online customer experience can predict online impulse buying behavior. One research involving customers from one major e-commerce platform found a positive relationship between online shopping and online impulsive buying, with self-control affecting that relationship. So it is not only about personality, it is also about the environment. Shopping apps are designed to be easy, fast, attractive, and rewarding. Next, let us talk about online shopping triggers. Research on scarcity promotions found that online retailers use limited quantity and limited time strategies to encourage impulse purchases. The study found that both types of scarcity increase perceived arousal, which then lead to impulse purchases. In the Philippines, this is very visible in our budol culture. A study on TikTok's Shopee finds and Gen Z consumers found that TikTok Shopee finds videos influenced several types of impulse buying behavior, including reminder impulse and planned impulse buying. Sometimes, before we even know what we want, the algorithm already introduces it to us. So at this point, I want to clarify something. Self-reward is not automatically bad. There is nothing wrong with treating ourselves. There is nothing wrong with buying something nice after working hard. And there is nothing wrong with enjoying our money. The difference is whether the reward is intentional or impulsive. An intention self-reward is planned. It fits the budget, chosen with awareness, does not create guilt, debt, regret, and aligns with our values and actual needs. An impulse self-reward is different. It is sudden, emotionally driven, often justified quickly, ignores budget or priorities, and may feel good at first but can create guilt or regret later. After impulse buying, many of us experience buyer's remorse. This is the uncomfortable feeling after a purchase when we start questioning whether we should have bought the item. It can sound like, bakit ko ba binili to? Or sayang lang pala pera ko. This happened because the emotional state during purchase is not always the same emotional state after purchase. So as we purchase, we feel excited, comforted, and rewarded. But after that purchase, we may become more rational again. That is when we realize the item did not fully match our needs, budget, or priorities. Another study included regret as part of the affective side of impulse buying tendency, along with feelings of pleasure, excitement, compulsion, and lack of control. We feel bad, we buy, we feel better, we regret, then we feel bad again. That is how impulse buying can become part of the emotional spending cycle. And as I end this episode, I want to emphasize that awareness creates a pause. And sometimes, that pause is enough to help us make a better decision. Again, self-reward is not wrong. The goal is not to stop enjoying our money. The goal is become more aware of whether our spending is intentional or impulsive. So before we buy, maybe we can ask ourselves, do I really need this, or am I trying to feel better right now? So that's it for me, Shopaholics. Again, I am Kez. Thank you and stay tuned for the next episodes. Bye!